We begin today, Daf Chof Dalet Amud Beis, right at the top of the Amud. Sagt the Gemara, Boim, Minei Rabbi Yochanan Mishmuel. Rabbi Yochanan asked Shmuel the question. Yesh Avelus b'Shabbos. Is there any Avelus that still applies on Shabbos? And the Gemara is talking about Avelus b'Tzina, privately. Or Ein Avelus b'Shabbos. Or there's no Avelus on Shabbos. Amalei, so he answered him, Ein Avelus b'Shabbos. There is no Avelus on Shabbos, not even privately. Yasvi Rabbanan kamei Rav Papa. The Rabbanan was sitting in front of Rav Papa. The Ka'amri mishmei de Shmuel. And they said the following statement in the name of Shmuel. Avol sheshimish mitasai, a avol that has marital relations, bimei evloi, in the time of his Avelus, chayiv misa, is liable for death. Amalei Rav Papa, so Rav Papa responded regarding the statement that no, this was misquoted and it's also not in the right name or the right person. Asur itmer. It was said that it's prohibited to have marital relations. And also, umishmei the Rabbi Yochanan itmer. And it was said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, not in the name of Shmuel. If there's a statement that you did hear in the name of Shmuel regarding a halacha, that chayiv misa, regarding the times of Avelos, this is what you heard. That Omar av tachlife baravimi Omar Shmuel, that oval shaloi para v'shaloi pirem, a oval that does not allow his hair to grow long and it does not do kriya, chayiv misa. So he would be chayiv misa. Why? Shenema, because by the source of where we learned this out from, by the children of Aaron, it says, Rasheichem al tefro, b'gdeichem le'sefroimu, you should not allow your hair to grow long, and you should not tear your garments. And then v'loi samusa v'goymer, and you will not die. So that's regarding them, that they did not have to keep Avelus, and if they follow that, they will not die. Ha acher, but somebody else, which we learn out from there, that he's supposed to let his hair grow long, and he's supposed to do kriya, so someone else, shaloi para v'shaloi pirim, that does not do the Avelus and allowing his hair to grow long, or tearing his garments, chayiv misa, he would be chayiv misa. So this is not, Taisus here points out, it's not the Pashut Pshat of the Pasuk over there. It says regarding them, Chayiv Misa, and we learn out that anyone else should do these Avelis, but the Pashut Pshat of the Pasuk, Taisus says it's only an Asmachta, it's not the simple Pshat. Omar Rav Papa, Rav Ram Bar Papa, Tane, we learned, Ba'avol Rabbasi. This is what's known as Masechta Smachis, where it's the Braises that bring all the halachas of Avelos, and a lot of what we learned there was quoted from that Masechta Smachis. So we learned there, Oval, Asr l'shamish mitasei b'mei evloi, that Oval is not allowed to have married relations in the time of Avelos. U'maisa be'echad, there was once a story with somebody, sheshimish mitasei b'mei evloi, that he did have married relations in the time of the Avelos, v'shomtu chazirim es gviyasai. And chazirim came and dragged his body, and I guess they killed him. Shmuel said, here's another halacha regarding the Avelos on Shabbos. And the Gemara starts with the Rosh Tevis. Pachaz, the three things that are hinted in the Rosh Tevis of Pachaz, which the Gemara will explain. Choiva, this is an obligation on Shabbos. Neser, the three things hinted in the abbreviation of Neser. Rishus, that's something which is your choice. And when the Gemara explains the Rosh Tevis, the Peichazayin is Priyas HaRoish, uncovering your head. So we're talking about in those times when the minig of Avel was that they had this special head covering during Avelos. So to uncover your head on Shabbos, Chazaras Kera, to put back the torn garment, or to put it back up, that you shouldn't see that it's torn, La Chayrav, on the back, that it should be sort of not torn. Zikifa Samita, to pick your bed back up, to sleep properly on your bed, Chayva. These are all an obligation of Shabbos, that you shouldn't keep any of this Avelis on Shabbos. However, the other three things hinted in Neser, which is Nilas HaSandal, wearing shoes on Shabbos, Tashmish HaMitter, guarding marital relations, or the Chitzas Yidayim V'Raglayim B'cham and Arvis, or washing yourself, bathing yourself right before Shabbos, Rishos. This is something which is your choice. If you want to do these things and then keep the Avelis in this way, you may, and if not, you don't have to. Rav says, no, Af Priyas HaRoish Rishos. Even uncovering that special head covering that the Avelim would wear, that is, that's also something that is up to your choice on Shabbos. So the Gemara now explains the difference between them regarding this detail. Shmuel, so according to Shmuel, What's the difference? That Ne'ilas, a sandal, the Rishus, whether you want to wear shoes on Shabbos or not as an oval is something which is your choice. What's the reason for this? The lav kula alma vidi disami misanai. Because shoes, at least in those times or in certain places, it's not something that everybody wears shoes even on a Shabbos. And therefore, if you're walking around with sandals or with slippers or with something else on Shabbos, it's not something which you're doing in open avelos. Because some people just don't wear shoes anyways. So therefore, that's your choice. So if so, when it comes to removing that head covering of an oval, lav kula alma vidi the megala shayu. Not everybody walks around with an uncovered head. In those times, b'chlal, the minig and the halacha of wearing a yarmulke was not really applied. It not really wasn't fully accepted. That's what the Gemara means here. So therefore, in those times, some people covered their head, some people didn't. So to tell a oval that he has to uncover his head on Shabbos, that it shouldn't see that he's behaving like an oval, why? Some people walk around with their head always covered. So the Gemara explains, the covering that we're talking about over here is something different. Shmuel is following his opinion regarding this head covering of an oval. Shmuel said, here the Gemara brings first something that he said that's not relevant to what we're speaking about. So he said, Kol kera she'ene b'shas chimum, kriya that's done not at the time of when your relative passed away. It's not when it's mamish, the person is feeling that grief right away, eine kera. So a person that does kriya later on, it doesn't count for kriya. And then he said the point that's relevant for here, if this atifa, this person that's doing a head covering at a time of an oval, if he's not wrapping his head and wrapping himself like the way the Yishmaelim would, it doesn't count as a head covering. And what does this mean? So the Gemara says, Machvir Rav Nachman demonstrated this, and he said, Ad guvi de dikne, that the head covering comes all the way down, it covers your face basically, it comes down to that little groove that a person has in his chin. So therefore, what do we understand from this? That this kind of a head covering for an oval, the way Shmuel understands it, is unusual. So if you're going to leave this head covering on Shabbos, it's going to be very clear that you're an oval. That's why he says it's an obligation to remove it on Shabbos. Whereas Rav held that the head covering is not so all the way down to your chin. It's just a head covering that's higher up, that's on the head. And therefore, even if you keep it on Shabbos, it doesn't matter. Again, going back regarding this halacha of this head covering, so this is only he has to remove that head covering if he's not wearing shoes. But if in Shabbos he already puts on his shoes, so the shoes are making it clear that he's not behaving like an oval. So then you can keep that head covering on, even according to Shmuel. Or maybe this is just Rabbi Yechanan's own opinion. Now the Gemara goes back to the statement that was mentioned before and that Shmuel said regarding the timing of Kriya. So what did we say? Kol kera she'ene b'shas chimum, Kriya that's done not in the time when the person is hot with the grief, eine kera. So that doesn't count as Kriya. Fragt the Gemara, but va'omru leil Shmuel, they reported to Shmuel at a later time about what happened that Rav passed away, that noch nafshe de Rav, that Rav passed away. And it says that Kori Alei, he tore for this news about Rav's passing, Treisar money, 12 garments. Omar, he said about Rav, Ozal Gavra, the person that has left this world, to have a mistafinim in there. I was afraid from him. I was afraid of all of his questions that he asked. He was sort of praising him of how great of a person he was. So we see over here that he tore Kriya not in the time when it was hot, when he actually passed away. Also, in another thing you see, they told Rabbi Yochanan, Nach nafshe the Rab Chanina passed away. He tore 13 coats or garments that were made from silk. So again, we see that the Kriya was not b'shas ma'aseh at the time of Chimum. Omar, he said, Ozal Gavre Dav Mistafinim Inei, Rab Chanina, a person left the world that I was afraid of his questions. So the Gemara explains, over there it's different. Shani Rabbanon, over there, when you're talking about these Rabbanon, that they were tearing Kriya, whether Shmuel for Rav or Rabbi Yochanan for Rab Chanina, the Kivnu Choshaita, Mitkri, Shmatayu, so because they mentioned the statements that they said and learning constantly, Kishas Chimum Dami. So therefore, all the time, it is that the grief is very, very strong and very hot, and therefore, even at a later time, they could take Kriya and it counts. Amalei Rav and Barada said to Rav about the subject of Kriya. Amar Talmidach Rav Amram, your student Rav Amram said that Tanya, we learned in the Braise, Oval Kol Shive Kairoi Lefanov. All of Shiva, so the kriya that he did in his garment is lefanov. He leaves it torn the way it is. You wear that torn garment. Vimbala hachlif, if he comes to change his garment, machlif, he could change his garment. V'keireya, he has to do kriya again in the new garment. Shabbos, on Shabbos, if he's wearing that garment that he tore, so he pulls back that kriya that it shouldn't be noticeable. If he comes to change his garments on Shabbos, machlif, he changes into new Shabbos clothing. He doesn't have to tear his new garments. So the point that the Gemara is bringing up from what you see here is that by a person that's in Shiva, even if he wears new garments at a later time in the Shiva, he does kriya again for that new garment, even though it's not shas chimum. It's not at the beginning of the Shiva. Before we said that kriya only counts at the time of chimum. So what's the point of doing a second kriya here? So the Gemara answers, Kitanyahi, when was that Braisa said? That's for the honor of a father and a mother. That then a person has to wear the garment that's torn, the entire Shiva, and therefore even later you would have to do Kriya again. Gemara explains, Oyson Kroin, when a person tore a second garment, Misachin or a Misachin? Are you able to later sew it back, or are you not able to sew it back? We had a discussion before, B'chlal, regarding Kriya, whether a person sews it back later or not. Over here, we're talking about this second garment that a person tore. Does he sew it back or not? The father of Rav Oshia and Bar Kapara argued about this. Chadoma, one opinion was Ein Misachin, that it's not sewed back. Chadoma Misachin. Another one said that it is. So Gemara says to Stayim, let's bring a proof that Rav Oshia, that the father of Rav Oshia is the one, the Oman, he said that Ein Misachin, that you don't sew it back. Because the Omer Rav Oshia, because we know that Rav Oshia himself said Ein Misachin, that you don't sew it back. So the Gemara now assumes, Miman Shmiele, from who did he hear this halacha that you don't sew it back? Lav Ma'avua, don't you think he heard it from his father? So we could know that his father is the one that said this. So the Gemara says, Loi, no, not necessarily. Could be he heard it, Mi Bar Kapara Rabbe Shmiele. Maybe he heard it from Bar Kapara, which was his teacher. So we still don't know who said what in that argument between the father of Rav Oshia and Bar Kapara. In fact, the Gemara Amar Oval, Metayel be'umkeli b'toich beisai. An oval could go around with an umkeli. Umkeli, Rashi says, is this garment which is torn in his house on Shabbos. So privately, if he wants to keep that availus of wearing the torn garment, he may. Ashkechei, Abaya, that is, Abaya Ashkechei Rav Yosef. Abaya encountered Rav Yosef on Shabbos, the Paras Le Sudra Reishe, that he was wearing this head covering that the Avelim wore then, and he was walking around in his house. Why are you wearing this head covering of a novel today? Do you not hold of this that it says that there's no Avelis on Shabbos? So Rav Yosef answered him, this is what Rav Yechanan said, those matters that are in privacy, in private, noyeg. Over there, the Avelis still goes on. So from here you see, going back right to the beginning of the Yomod, Rabbi Yechanan is the one that asked this question from Shmuel, whether there's Avelis on Shabbos and privately. And Shmuel said to him that no, there's no Avelis even privately on Shabbos. So here at the end of the Yomod, we basically see that Rabbi Yechanan never accepted that psak from Shmuel, and he himself held that Dvarim Shebetzina, there is Avelis on Shabbos. Going back to the Mishnah, it said in the Mishnah, Rabbi Eliezer Oime, Mishacharev Beis HaMikdash, from after the Churban Beis HaMikdash, Atzeres Keshabbos. So we were discussing in the Mishnah what happens whether our Shabbos interrupts the Avelis. So it said Shabbos does not interrupt the Avelis. The Avelis continues. But a Yom Tiv does interrupt the Avelis. You don't return to the Shiva after the Yom Tiv. But after the Churban Beis HaMikdash, and there's no Karbanis on Shavuos, so Shavuos is just one day like Shabbos, so therefore the Shiva does continue after Shavuos. And then it said there, Benigeh to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. There was another opinion over there in the Mishnah, which was Rabbi Gamliel, which daf was this on? See how far back this was. It said, Rabbi Gamliel said that Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is like a Yom Tiv. And after Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, you don't return to the Avelis. It's the Mishnah on Daf Yates. So the Gemara now says, Amar Rav Gidl bar Menashe, Amar Shmuel, halacha k'Rabbi Gamliel. We paskin like Rabbi Gamliel that Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, even though it's only one day, or Rosh Hashanah, at least Menat Torah is only one day, but after Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, one does not continue the Avelis. Veke the Masni, others learned the halacha here, Lahad, that Rav Gidl bar Menashe. Of this, that Rav Gidl bar Menashe said that there's a halacha here regarding a completely different subject. Regarding this, that it says as follows: Kol lamed yoim, that in the first 30 days, so a child, Rahman al-Islam, passes away, so Tinnik Yaitze, the child, so he's taken out to burial, B'cheik, in the lap, or in other words, the people that carrying him out, carrying him in the hand, that he doesn't have to be placed into a oren, into a coffin. V'nikbar, and then he's buried there, B'isha achas shnei noshim, and it's enough to, you have the presence of one woman that's there, and 2 men, so that's, you don't have to have a minion or more people the way you usually have by a levaya. But it shouldn't be 1 man and two women there because of an issue of yichud. If there's 2 men and these are 2 anoshim kshedim with a woman, that's okay. But 1 man with 2 noshim, there's more of an issue of yichud, and therefore should not be done that way. Abishal says, Af noshim, 1 man and 2 women is also okay in such a situation when they're mourning and they're burying a baby. We're not concerned that anything will go wrong here and they'll misbehave. And also, this Braisa continues regarding the halacha of a baby that's not 30 days old that passes away, that there's really no halachas of avelus as well. They don't stand after the burial in a row, the way it is usually that you menachem oval. Of birchas avelim. The minig is that the first suda of an oval, they would eat it outside, and there was a special bracha that they said menachem avelim, so you don't say this bracha. V'tanchumi avelim, and there's also no b'chlal consoling that there is always by an oval. But if it's ben shloishim, if the baby was already 30 days old, yaitze b'dluskime, so he is carried out in a coffin. It's different shot than what this dluskime means. Rashi says it's an oren. Others say that it's similar to an oren, or kaponim. So he is carried out in an oren. And Rabbi Yehuda explains and says, loy dluskime haniteles b'kosef. He's not carried out in a coffin that's carried on the shoulders, the way it usually is by an older person that passed away. El aniteles ba'agapayim. It's a small oren that's carried in the hands. And this baby that's already 30 days old, v'oimdim olav b'shura, you do stand in a row to be menachem oval, v'oimdim olav birchas avelim, v'tanchumi avelim. So the regular halachas of avelis does apply. Ben yud beis chodesh, a baby that's a year old that passes away, yoitze b'mitta, so he's carried out in a regular coffin like an adult. Rabbi Kiva says, Hu ben shana. If the baby was a year old, ve'vodav ke ben shtayim, and his body was built and was large enough, old enough, like mature enough, like a baby that's 2 years old, or hu ben shtayim, if the baby is 2 years old, ve'vodav ke ben shana, even if his body is still very small, like a 1-year-old, yaitze b'mitte, he's carried out in a regular way like an adult. Rab Shimon ben Elazar says, hayaitze b'mitte, when a baby is taken out in a regular mitt, in a regular oren, like an adult, rabim matzivin olav, so then everybody is matzivin olav. Their face is, the literal translation of matzivin means it's like shining, but over here it means like they express their grief for this baby the way you do for an adult. If he's not carried out in the regular oren, any rabim matzivin olav. The avelis has to be expressed by everybody is not on the same level. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says, Niker lerabim, if this was a child that was old enough that he was already known to people, he came around outside and he walked around on his own and so on. So then rabim is asking imay. Then many have to come and be busy with it, just like by a regular levaya, where everybody has to come and people are menachem avos. So over here as well the same. But if the baby was young enough that he was in the house and people didn't know him, he wasn't known to anybody, then the levaya and the burial, everything could be done more in a private way, and not everybody has to come and participate. What's the age for a eulogy for a child that passes away? Rab Meir said in the name of Rabbi Shmuel that aniyim, if it's a child from poor people, b'nei shalish, the age is 3 years old. And Hashirim, a child from rich people, b'nei chamish, from 5 years old. Rashi says, with poor people, because a poor person has nothing, and this is his child that passed away, so by them, the pain and the suffering is much more, so therefore even from a younger age, there's a point to give a hesped. By Hashirim, it's not the same. Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rabbi Shmuel differently, Aniyim b'nei chamish, by poor people it's when the child is 5 years old, and Ashirim b'nei sheish, by rich people it's when the child is 6 years old that there's a hesped given. Or b'nei zekanim, if there's older people that a child passed away, kibnei aniyim, for them it's like an ani that passed away because they very much were much more stronger connected to this child that passed away, and so therefore it's like an ani. Omer Rav Gidl bar Menashe, Omer Rav. So regarding this braise, Rav Gidl bar Menashe said in the name of Rav, halacha Rabbi Yehuda she'amar mishum Rabbi Shmuel. That halacha is like the second opinion here that Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rabbi Shmuel. Now the Gemara goes back to the quote of the Mishnah that we quoted before regarding Shavuos or Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, that they interrupt the Avelos. The Gemara says a very interesting thing. That Darash Rabbanoni Bar Sosin darshan da pische de Beinesiya, at the opening at the gate of the house of the Nasi. He said it the following halacha: Yoim echad lefnei atzeres. You have, if there's one day of Avelos before Shavuos. So once there's one day that's kept of Avelos, and now Shavuos is coming, that's it. It ends the Avelos. So you have that one day is counted like 7 days. And then Va'atzeres. Then there's the Yom Tov of Shavuos itself. The Yom Tov of Shavuos itself is also going to be counted like 7 days. What we're talking about over here is regarding the Shloshim. When you count the days of the Shloshim, so because the Avelos of the day before Shavuos ended the Avelos, and we consider that one day to be like 7 days of Avelos, so that one day is counted like 7 days. And the same thing regarding Shavuos itself, even though Shavuos is only one day Yom Tov, but for that one day of Shavuos, you now have 7 days that you could bring a carbon to be mashlim for that one day of Shavuos. So therefore we consider that one day of Shavuos to be like every Yom Tov. Just like every Yom Tov is 7 days, that one day of Yom Tov is also counted like 7 days. So therefore, Harekan Arba Asar. So the day before and the day of Shavuos itself, together, it's considered to be like 14 days have passed. That's what he darshaned. Shomar Rabami heard what he darshaned and Ve'ikbid. He was bothered by this. Why? Because he said, Omar, Atu Didehi? Is this your own drasha that you're saying? This is your chiddush? The Rabbi Eliezer Omar Abayshi. This is based on what Rabbi Eliezer Omar Abayshi said. The Gemara says a similar thing happened. Darash Rabbi Yitzchak Nafche. Rabbi Yitzchak Nafche darshaned Akila the Reish Galusa by the threshold, by the entrance of the Bei Galusa, of the Reish Galusa that is, and he said the same thing. Yoim Echad Lefnei Atzeres, one day before Shavuos, and then Ve'atzeres, and then the Shavuos itself. So together we count that as 14 days. Harei Kan Arba Asar. It's considered like 14 days already passed. Shomer Rav Sheishes heard this drasha that Rabbi Yitzchak Nafche darshaned. Ikpit. He's also bothered by this. He said, Oma Atu Didei, this is his chiddush. The Rabbi Elazar Amar Abayshi. This is what Rabbi Elazar said in the name of Rabbi Shia. So he said as follows regarding Shavuos, that minayin la'atzeres sheyesh lo tashlumin kol shiva. From where do we know that Shavuos, even though it's one day, but nevertheless you could continue bringing the karbanis for the 7 days? Shanam, because the pasuk says b'chag hamatzis, b'chag Shavuos, that we compare Shavuos to chag hamatzis. Ma chag hamatzis yesh lo tashlumin kol shiva. Just like by Pesach, so you can bring the carbon the entire Yom Tov all 7 days. Av chag Shavuos yesh lo tashlumin kol shiva. So too Shavuos has tashlumin all 7 days, and therefore that one day of Shavuos, we count it like 7 days. We compare the Yomim Tovim to one another. So therefore he said the source of this concept comes from this statement of Rabbi Elazar Amar Abayshi. Adbere Rav Papa Rav Ivya Sabe. Rav Papa showed and explained Rav Ivya Sabe v'Dorash, and he darshaned as follows. Similar regarding Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Yoim Echad Lefnei Rosh Hashanah. You have one day of Avelos before Rosh Hashanah. And then Vir Rosh Hashanah, then you have the day of Rosh Hashanah itself. Harei Kan Arba Asar. That's also counted like 14 days. This is an even bigger chiddush because by Rosh Hashanah there is no tashlumin, there is no karbanis b'chlal, and there is no tashlumin of 7 days. But nevertheless, we compare the Yomim Tovim to each other, and even regarding Rosh Hashanah, I say the same thing, that it's counted like 14 days. So then Ravina, based on this said, Hilkach, if so, we can say as follows. If there's one day of Avelis before Sukkot, so that day is already counted as 7, and then the Chag, and then the 7 days of Sukkot, that's another 7 days, and then Shmini Shalai. Then it comes to Shmini Atzeres, which is a Yom Tov for itself, and that Yom Tov for itself is compared to the other Yomim Tovim, and that day for itself is also counted like 7 days. So together, it's counted as if 21 days had already passed. Ravina iklal Surah de Pras. Ravina had come to Surah, which is near the Pras river. Amalei Rav Chavive, so Rav Chavive, Misurah de Pras. Rav Chavive, that was there from Surah de Pras, said, Ravina, Omamar, did the master say this halacha, that Yom Echad Lefnei Rosh Hashanah, that one day before Rosh Hashanah, and then Vir Rosh Hashanah, and also Rosh Hashanah itself, Harei Kan Arba Asar, that together you can count that as 14 days? Did you say this? Amalei, so Ravina said, no, I did not say this. All I said was, Ano mistavre Rabbi Gamliel hu damina. All I said was that it makes sense to paskin like Rabbi Gamliel. What did Rabbi Gamliel say? That every Rosh Hashanah is compared to a Yom Tif, just like a Yom Tif ends the Avelus, Rosh Hashanah also ends the Avelus. That's all I said. But then the next point, that because it's compared to every Yom Tif, that just like every Yom Tif is 7 days, that we consider Rosh Hashanah to also be like 7 days, that point I never said.